Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Courageous Conversations, transforming relationships one conversation at a time. And now here's your host, dating coach and chief love officer at lastfirstdate.com, Sandy Weiner.
Well, hello and welcome. I am Sandy. I'm a dating coach and the founder of Last First Date. What I do best is help midlife daters find love again, no matter how old you are or what your relationship history is like. I created this show to inspire you to live a more courageous life and to improve your relationships one conversation at a time. Today I'm excited to bring you my good friend, Jane Pollak. Jane is a living example of how to turn a passion into a thriving business. She is a successful entrepreneur, a public speaker, an author, and a business coach. Jane launched her business career in the very unlikely field of egg decoration. The lessons Jane learned along the way led her to share her story and give advice to women entrepreneurs traveling the country and beyond. In 2010, she re-released her book, Soul Proprietor, 101 Lessons from a Lifestyle Entrepreneur, with updated lessons including how to pursue your dream during an economic downturn and how to use new technology to authentically promote your business. In addition, Jane found love in midlife after her divorce, and that is an inspiring story. I'm sorry, I'm a little getting over a cold and I'm falling over my words today. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you. I'm getting over a cold too.
I know we're going to be coughing our lungs out here today, but I'm so glad you were able to join me. And
me too.
I hope you're feeling a little better.
I do.
Good. So let's talk about what does nipping relationships in the bud mean to you?
Well, I was thinking of my dating history, and I've been very fortunate to be in a relationship with a wonderful man for a year now, so I have to think back a little bit to the online dating that I went through a couple of years ago, and there was a guy named Dick, which was kind of cute, Dick and Jane, and we got to date 3, and I just, I wasn't feeling it, and I knew that I wasn't in for the long run, and he was a good salesman, and he kind of sort of worked around stuff, and actually you and I had walked, and he had left me a message, and I knew I needed to get back to him, and you and I had gone for a walk, and it's like, I don't feel it, it really isn't happening, and you gave me great words to use, and I called him and I said, my gut's telling me this just isn't working, and he expressed surprise and disappointment, but he accepted it. It was incontrovertible. You can't argue with my gut. So I nipped it in the bud because we had gotten to, I was going to say like second base before I even had really wanted to get up to the plate. And our first date was coffee, and then it was dinner and a movie. And in the movie, he started, putting his hands on my knees. It's like, wait a second, we didn't negotiate any of this. And I don't, I'm just uncomfortable with the whole thing. And I didn't like him enough. And, it was wrong. And I knew that. And it could easily have just gone on because he was taking the lead in the way he knew how to take the lead, and that didn't work for me, nor did I want it to, which was the bigger clue.
Mhm. Well, I love what you said about what didn't work for you. I think it's so important for women to hear those words because it's a simple thing to say. But, it's so important to tune into that voice inside your head that's saying this isn't working for me, or the timing is wrong, or, this person really isn't for me. Because I'll tell you that, and I've been guilty of this, it's so easy to fall into a relationship with someone who's really into you because of your self-esteem issues or whatever. And you're thinking, well, this might be as good as it gets, so let me take what I have here.
I use the phrase "fall into," you don't walk in open-eyed. It's like you fall into it. And the thing is, I'll say it's actually very easy for me to know, but to take the risk of saying, I made some notes and I said 1 moment of fear and pain eliminated weeks or months of dread and disappointment, because I knew that if I didn't say something, we would be on this path, this journey that I didn't want to be on. And, I would have been like, why didn't you say something? It's like, something, I got to say it right now up front, it's not working. And it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I think it takes courage, and you're right, it does save so much time in the long run, or so much pain in the long run, and I think people don't see that equation. So that was well put.
Thank you.
Yeah. So were there other relationships that you nipped in the bud?
Well, Dave is the man that I am with now, and I said to him, "You're the first person to get past 2 dates." I knew that by the second date I would know, and I would say all in all I probably communicated with 100, and I think that's a good figure. Like to have 1 in 100 work out, that's probably what the odds are. I'm going to be 65, so I was 62, 63 when I started this process. And the odds, start to skew poorly in that direction. I think when you're in your 20s, women have, tons and tons of response. But I think once you get to your 60s, it's not quite as robust. Mm-hmm. And so, I was doing the footwork and sending out emails to people online saying, your profile looks interesting. I love NPR also, whatever I felt like responding. So I would say there were probably around 100, and I would say probably half of them didn't even respond to me, if not more than that. And then maybe there were, 20 or 30 phone conversations that we would get to that level. Though there was one guy who I was in communication with for a couple of months, if not more, and never actually got to the phone level. So that one I didn't nip, but we never got to a date. And then there were about, I'd say, 12 dates, coffee dates, and maybe 6 or 7 lunch or dinner dates, and then Dave was the only one who went beyond that. So
well,
there were a lot.
I think,
there were a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot, and I think it's important also that you put out there that it does change as you get older. I think I've often heard experts who say, oh, no, it's pretty much the same thing, you date in midlife as dating when you're younger, but I think a lot of things change. I do think that the numbers change, like you said, and I think it's important to take a reality check that out of 100 people, you narrowed it down to 1, and you didn't get disheartened to the point where you quit. It can be disheartening.
I didn't quit.
It can be disheartening.
It's disheartening. Yeah, I'm a vibrant, sexy, wonderful woman, and nobody's paying attention to me. It's like, what's wrong with this? So, and I'll say what does stay the same, I think, are your feelings. That it's like it's painful, it's exhilarating. I felt like a 12. I remember calling you once and saying, I feel like I'm 12 years old. The feelings are very much the same, but the mental attitude, fortunately, and the maturity level has changed. And so I knew I knew for sure it was not about me, that they're not returning my calls, they're not paying attention, was not in any way personal. And I never took it personally. Although it can feel that way, I chose not to allow that.
That's a really good piece of advice, too. And I think that too many people take it personally. First of all, we don't even know these people. They don't know you. I mean,
right.
Most of it is just you're shooting in the dark. You're sending out emails to total strangers. You don't even know if they're active members, let alone married, or, there's so many things you don't know until you know. So,
that's right.
But what I get this image of you when you were dating online as, sort of sitting on this throne of like, I am choosing here. I will decide who I let into my palace.
That's so funny. That was not my image. Like a fishing rod.
A fishing rod.
Let's see who bites, and do I want to reel them in, or am I going to throw this one back, or what?
Yeah, but you were in control. You were in control of your emotions and your who you selected, who you were letting in, and who you were throwing back. So
that's
I like
true.
that image of the fisherman, fisherwoman.
Yeah.
I'll have to write a blog post about that. So, and so some of the languaging that you used, I think, is good for people to hear. So, what can you give us an example of, some other ways that you might have told people that it wasn't working?
I think that it's interesting. I think my younger daughter is a lot like me, and you can just tell that when she is not interested in pursuing something, and I can tease her about it, but the messages, they're like clear, invisible boundaries. And there were about 3 or 4 guys who I had meals with who were perfectly fine, but I didn't give them one signal that I wanted to continue, that I was
right.
just being polite, I was cordial, and friendly and engaged, but there was no come hither, this is going someplace. And so there was one guy I was surprised not to hear from, but I think he knew inevitably we were not a match. Then there was another one I was surprised not to hear. He was an attorney. We had lunch, and he said he had a really, really good time, and then I never heard from him. I was like, well, that's interesting. And I didn't do anything to pursue it. There was one man where I felt disappointed that he didn't pursue me. We had a wonderful dinner. It was really fun, very nice kiss, and I didn't hear from him, although he said, I'll call you. And I emailed him and said, just following up to say thanks so much, had a really good time. And I think you said I'll call you, and I just wanted to double check because it's been a couple of weeks. So it was just, me kind of closing the loop. And he wrote a very nice email saying, I was really, really good company, and there was somebody he was pursuing, and he wanted it to be exclusive. Now, what I've come to understand is that that's a very nice way of blowing somebody off, but it was still, it felt considerate, and it closed the loop. So in every other case, I was pretty clear this wasn't something I was interested in. And the one time where I was, I got clarity because I wanted to know. I didn't want to be left hanging there wondering, well, is he going to call? Is he waiting 3 weeks, a month, or whatever? But I think my body language, my way of being was, just this was very nice, but there's nothing happening after this. So I think there's that unconscious nipping in the bud or subconscious nipping in the bud that was a subliminal level message without being as clear as my gut's telling me this isn't going to work. I just wasn't giving them anything to hold on to.
Yeah, I think that it's important to bring the body language piece into it because I think we give off messages, and sometimes the opposite happens. If you are interested in someone and don't give them the message that you're interested, they leave confused. So it works in both directions, but and a lot of men don't get it. You can be so what you think is blatantly clear about your body language, and they still don't get that you're not interested. So, I think it's interesting that you were able to go back and close the loop because most women don't do that, in my experience, and they kind of wait for the man to contact them. And, you and I are both, business women, and we like to do business that way. We're not passive people, and I think it becomes this kind of balancing act of, do I not bring my aggressive self to dating? You want to show up as a woman, and you want to be receptive to love, and it's kind of that balancing act. I'm sort of in the middle of all that right now, wanting a man to pursue me and not show up as aggressive, because I do think that can be off-putting. So do you feel that you brought aggression to the dating process, or do you feel that you brought more of your sexy women stuff?
I don't think so. I think I'm thinking of one guy we met at a diner, which was not a good idea. There was a much nicer place, and I think I was looking at where he was coming from geographically, and so I recommended it, but it was like the wrong atmosphere for it. It was just, too casual and not upscale enough. And we we kept trying different topics. He was attractive enough, but I almost knew right away, I'm not feeling anything. And, I could feel it winding down, and I said something like, this didn't really work, did it? And he said no. It was clear that nothing was going to happen. And I said, let me just add, I'd just like to get some feedback. What do you think it was? He said, we're just not connecting. And I was like, thank you for saying that, because I actually felt more connected in that moment when he said that he was attuned to where connection was. It was like, he would talk about cars and I would talk about art, and it was just like there was nothing where we were both had something to say on the same subject. And when he said that about not connecting, it's like, ding, ding, ding. That would have been worthy of talking about. But It was interesting, and and there was one man I talked to who on his profile looked like he could be very attractive. I think he was a physician or something, but all he wanted to talk about was a political issue that was in the news, and I was so not interested in that. And I just heard him kind of ranting, and he was giving me volumes of information, and and there had not been any connection established, so there was no permission to do that.
So would you say to someone like that, can we talk about something else? This isn't an area of deep interest for me.
Well, interestingly, because I didn't like his viewpoint, I didn't even give him that much rope. It's like, I can see this is not somebody that I would be interested in. I know it's not fair to make a snap judgment, but you want to have something where you feel there's a remote sense of interest, and I wasn't getting any of that from him. So I think sometimes it's just better to nip it even before the bud starts. Just say, I don't think so. I got to go. And could be a mistake. It very well could be a mistake, but with Dave, there was an immediate connection. He wanted to connect. He sought ways to connect. It was just so rich and deep very quickly. And so when somebody gets it right, it's like, this is what I've been waiting for.
Yeah,
rather than trying to make
flow.
something else work, there's a total flow.
Yeah, and otherwise you're just trying to put a square peg in a round hole kind of thing.
Yes.
I have definitely felt that too. So tell us a little more about Dave, if you can, just in terms of.
How long have we got,
people. I think
this is such a wonderful man. So our first, one of the things I like about him was that he said that he responded to everybody who emailed him. And, what I got in the demographics is that men are in the driver's seat, that he would get 6 or 8 emails either a day or a week. Now, if I got 6 a month, that was really a lot. So,
right.
I was really envious in the fact that he was, kind enough to respond to everybody. And I reached out and called him. He gave me his number, and I think that's the protocol, is that you call. And I have to say, I almost hung up because I didn't like his voicemail. But I thought, I will give him a little bit more, more than that, a bigger shot than that. And he called me back and was so gracious. And our initial conversation was warm and really kind, and he was connecting all over the place. I just felt a sense of being seen and heard in the conversation. And then he scheduled another one, and he asked to meet, and he was going to come down to my area, which was a good hour and 20 minutes away from him. So there were so many demonstrations of his kindness and willingness to meet me more than halfway, which was wonderful. Because I was thinking, I'll get on the road, I'll come to wherever you are. I thought you had to do that. And here was a real gentleman showing up very early. And then as soon as we exchanged last names and a little more information, he read everything that I had written on my website. He ordered the book I had written and read it, I think by the time we met practically. It was just, he was showing great interest in me. And that was a little scary and unnerving, but I also have developed in my life to the point where I could receive someone's affection very quickly and deeply. So that was, those were huge things for me. So he's, I think you and I have talked about, casting a wider net. He lived further away. His demographic was that you had to be within 30 miles, and we both overlooked that. He was almost 70 miles away. I don't think the education mattered. I think his income was below what I would have normally chosen, but it's like, well, that's, let me meet him. And in every other way, he has more, it's like, it's not an issue. It's just not an issue. And his lifestyle is so rich, and what he does and who he knows and how he lives his life is so bountiful and abundant that that one issue is not really is moot. And he's cute and he's sexy and he's thoughtful, and he's very cute and multi-talented, multi-dimensional, interested in, he's a real citizen. I call him a Renaissance man. He's really, he does so many interesting things. He reads voluminously. He's informed about everything without being opinionated. He does literacy volunteers. He, drives the volunteer ambulance. So he's very involved in the community. He's, on the political town committee. The first night he couldn't call me back because he was flipping pancakes at dinner, Shrove Tuesday dinner or something. So he's somebody who's really involved in a lot of people's lives and highly regarded and just a lot of fun. And he has a nice sense of humor, which is really important too.
Yeah. So there's so much here I want to just address. First of all, widening the net. I have so many women who come to me and want only somebody with a, master's and up, master's degree and higher level of education, or they want somebody who has a high income because they equate high income with self-esteem. It's really about looking what's underneath your desire to have those things. So, if he had a lower education level than you, but he reads voluminously and he really is smart, that's what's going to matter in the end, because you could have a doctorate and be the most boring person, and I've certainly met many of those. Yeah.
He brings so much to the table. He's always enlightening me about things. I have such a good time because he surprises me. There are things, I think I have a pretty wide world view, and he has expanded it exponentially. I'm learning about things and trying things I never would. He's home making maple syrup now. He taps his own trees.
Wow.
Really. He crocheted me an Afghan for my birthday. He just, he does a lot of things, and he's so thoughtful. He sung in a musical theater over the summer, and he was in Sound of Music, and he made a hat for every kid in the Von Trapp family. He crocheted hats for them.
That's
just
great.
Giving and caring and wonderful.
Yeah, and those are what matters. When somebody gets stuck on a height requirement and says, but I love to wear heels, and I go, yeah, but when you're horizontal and the lights are out, what's going to really matter? It's really true.
Or as my mother said, my sister was going out with somebody, and she said he's short but very rich. My mother said, how tall is he when he stands on his money?
Right.
So there are other considerations.
Right. My friend used to say to me, if you can find him and he's a great guy, just make sure he's rich too, and make sure I get the last say on him, because you're not so good at picking. That was right after my divorce, but I'm much better at picking right now. And so you have a great guy, and I've met Dave, and I've seen you two together, and there's so much love and affection there, and it's something that I think is missing in most people's relationships is the whole admiration piece. Really having something that you admire in each other. And I remember something you said to me right away, which I loved, which was that he said he got the best version of you. And, it's you both are fully grown people who are fully formed. I mean, still growing, but I'm saying formed and have your own life, and you're happy with your lives. And that's a really important piece that people need to remember.
And it works really nicely, because now that I've moved to New York City, he lives 2 hours away, and we both are, we're interdependent rather than codependent. So we have a wonderful time on the weekends, but there's not this, when am I going to see you, or I haven't seen, we both have such full lives that it's a joy when we come together. We both leave our work aside and focus on each other, and it's really a lot of fun. And during the week I don't worry, I'm not paying enough attention to him, nor is he worrying about me. We know how to take care of ourselves in that way, and that's very rewarding.
That's great. So I have another question for you. Do you apply? All right, let me try that again. Do you apply the nipping in the bud method in other areas of your life? Because I know you're a very successful businesswoman, and I'm imagining there might be other areas that you might apply that to.
I thought of a couple of examples where, I think there was another question about how can you tell when it's nipping in the bud is called for. The answer to that is that my gut is so clear. I know myself so well at this point, and I heard a wonderful phrase in my coach training, which is that the body is the midwife to the mind. So before my head can even process it, I'm having a physical reaction to information. And sometimes it's thrill, and sometimes it's repellent. It's just, I can't stand this. So I know right away. I mean, sometimes, things are unclear, but the yes or no are very clear. And I met with a woman recently who, very bright woman, really fun. She's written a great book. And we got together for a couple of hours, and she said, I'd like to collaborate with you. I think, our paths have been very different, and I think we could do something really interesting. And she named a place. And I thought, no. I didn't say, I processed it for a moment because I didn't want to just reject it out of hand. I knew there was no juice there. There was nothing, and it's not a rejection of her. I don't feel like generating that kind of energy for something that I'm not positive about. It's like it's not that I want to slam dunk. I just know, not now. It's not the right time. So I'm crystal clear about that, which is very valuable in business because you can go down a lot of, dark alleys with somebody and have nothing come out of it. I collaborated with somebody who you're speaking to, who's a coach for men in relationships, Brad Britton, and when we met through our coaching leadership program, at the end of the program, he said to me, I'd like to work with you, and it was like, absolutely. And we did a program together for a couple of years where he came out to Connecticut, I went out to California, we worked beautifully together, and we saw each other recently. He said, I'd like to work together again. I thought, not now. It's not the right time. So I am really clear, not that the relationship is nipped, but that opportunity in the relationship is nipped. So there's a distinction there. But the other thing, the opposite, I met a woman recently when I moved to New York who said she was doing this life-changing, she was taking advantage of a life-changing opportunity, and as I got to know her, I said, tell me about this opportunity. And she said it's called Semester at Sea, and it'll be 4 months, going around the world. The second I heard that, I was like, I need to know more about this. And as soon as I went online, it's like, I want this. So part of nipping it in the bud is knowing yourself so well that when an opportunity or a challenge comes up, you can identify it immediately. And the thing I've developed, and I do meditation, and I do, all kinds of things, journaling, and all those things that help me get clearer in my mind. And it's a great tool to use for every aspect of my life. Even ordering in a restaurant, it's like that, not that. I have enormous clarity, and I think people are attracted to it because not that many people really have it. And they say, now here's somebody who knows what she wants. And that's an attractive thing to offer.
I agree. I think that it's wonderful that you have that clarity. I think that people often have it, they don't trust it. And they don't put like a magnifying lens on it like you do. I know that I had intuition my whole life. I'm a very strongly intuitive person, and I overrode my intuition because of my self-doubts. And it led to my marriage not being a good marriage. And, my intuition was screaming, this is not a good idea. And I just thought, well, these things will change. My intellect was saying, well, you're being too picky. That's an important thing. It's that often people do have much more of a strong intuition than they're giving themselves credit for or than they're trusting. So, meditation, I think, is a great way to tune it up. And I think just I did a lot of intuition work after my divorce where I taught how to increase your intuition. And I think, just taking intuitive risks, like listening and then following through on things that your intuition is telling you and seeing what happens is an important thing all over your life. Like even if it's about making a right turn instead of a left turn. Anything. So
it's funny. I was at a conference over, I guess it was on Thursday, and there were we were at the final, closing keynote or whatever, closing remarks, and there was a woman who was going to get up and give that, and I was with two other women, and one of the women in my group said, "My intuition is telling me to leave," and she left, and I thought, well, that's very interesting, and mine wasn't really saying anything. I think I was just exhausted. It was a very long day. And the woman got up to speak, and she was like, okay, everybody stand up now and give the person next to you a hug. And within 5 minutes, the other woman and I said, let's go. So, that woman's intuition was spot on. And I wasn't, I think there are times where you can be tuned in and not tuned in. So, I think it's really, and rest is a really big part of that too. Ariana Huffington was she was my favorite keynote speaker at this event. And she said, when I'm rested, I can do anything. So I think, part of that is
your 7 hours of sleep or something was one of her tips.
Yeah.
It's true. You don't function well when you're exhausted. And that also goes with overextending yourself. I was speaking to yesterday I spoke at an event, and the person who was the organizer was telling me she's just taking on too many things, but, she just wants to fit one more thing, and I was just like, who's in charge of your life, lady?
Mm-hmm. The other question is for the sake of what?
Yeah,
exactly. You're taking on one more thing for the sake of what?
Right. Which part are you enjoying, and which part are you doing for somebody else or for some other reason? Yeah.
Right.
I think I finally figured out how to take questions, and there was a caller who might be asking a question. So I wanted to just take a break and see if anybody has any questions. If you have called in and you have a question, just press 1 on your telephone, and I will see a hand raised, I think. And I'm not sure how to see the hand raised, but I can unmute. So if anybody has a question, just press 1. Oop, we got a question here. Yay. Okay, I'm unmuting.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. It's Irma.
Hi, Irma.
Hey, Irma.
This is such a remarkable event because it was a year ago, the spring equinox, that I went up to Connecticut and first heard about Dave.
Funny.
So this is wonderful to hear the two of you on this call. And Jane, so great to hear your voice again. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. A couple of my thoughts were when nipping in the bud after listening to Ken Mossman, am I pronouncing it right, Sandy?
Yeah.
It seemed that, I want to enter into that phase of men being nervous. So, Jane, when you were talking about nipping it in the bud early on in one of the early dates when the gentleman was talking about some sort of a political issue, whatever it was, I wonder about that space versus saying, okay, that doesn't really interest me. Let's either overtly saying that or shifting the conversation and see if there's any resistance to that. So I wonder about your experience doing that. And did you say you went out with 100 men before you met Dave?
No, I was in contact, either, sent emails to, I would say I probably physically met in person 12 to 15, but I responded to 100, maybe 50 got back to me. I had phone calls and email correspondence with, 30 or 40. So my pool altogether was 100, but of people I reached out to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got that.
I'm
a
think
number
with
person.
The guy who, who was talking about the political issue, I didn't even have the mojo to ask him. And to me that was a signal. There was just nothing that was attractive enough about him to even continue the conversation. So I trusted that.
Right, and that's really helpful because I sometimes bring a little bit of yesterday into a conversation with gentlemen, which is, let me try to make this better.
Yes, exactly. And if you're doing that from the get-go, where with Dave, it's been effortless throughout. And he is so forthcoming. At the end of our dinner, he said, I'm taking my profile down because I found what I want. And, I'd like to see you again. And it's like, really, that was a little pressure, but I didn't, I thought he can do whatever he wants. That's fine.
So at that point, you didn't feel,
I have to.
Nope. No, I like him enough.
Yeah.
That I'm willing to take down mine, or you just said, no, he's doing his thing, I'm going to keep mine up. And
I definitely kept mine up for, a good month or two, because I didn't, I had no arrangement. And I want to say something also for those listening, because I think this is really important. He was so, even in our conversations before dinner, so forthcoming and so generous of heart and spirit. And we met on a Sunday night, and on Friday night I had dinner with a friend, and I said, I'm scared because he's kind of awash in liking me, like it may be too much. And the friend said to me, Jane, I had something like that 7 years ago, and I let it go, and I've been looking for it ever since. So I just said, I am going to breathe and allow it to come in and see what happens. And I'm so glad, because I could have rejected him early out of my own lack of self-esteem, and I thought, let me see how this goes. And there was nothing icky about it. It was all wonderful and heartfelt. He's the way I describe him is he has enormous capacity. And so he's just this very loving man, and I had to expand my ability to take in love to allow that, because I think, for some people it would be scary, but I had enough bandwidth to really allow it in. Thank goodness.
Yes.
Well, I think that I just want to say that I think part of the reason that you probably were also able to let it in is because of the fact that Dave is an independent person. He wasn't looking to form a codependent relationship, which is what those kinds of men can feel like.
Right.
When it just feels like they're leeching on. I mean, I've had a bunch of those where
You've
I feel
described
claustrophobic.
That to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's finding that, really going beyond that and saying, what is this and what's the fear in me or what's going on for me? And I'm glad you stuck with it, because he's great. And I also want to say that you talk about it being seamless, and you have had arguments, just so people know that it's healthy to have arguments in relationships. But I love how you talk about your stuff, because you're able to feel safe enough to tell him what's going on for you and then work it through. And
Immediately.
Yeah.
I haven't let anything fester for, more than a few hours, if then. I mean, mostly it's like on one of our first dates, we were riding the train home from New York to Connecticut, and he was showing me, and I'll tell you, this is nothing against Dave, nothing is more boring than looking at photos of people you don't know. And on iPhones, where there are hundreds of them, and this is my cousin this, and this was so-and-so's wedding, and this was like, and he was going on and on very excitedly and not noticing my sheer boredom, and I found myself just fading, and finally I just said, I'm glazing over and I'm not hearing you anymore. And he turned his position in the train, because you sit next to each other, and he looked me in the eyes and he said, thank you for telling me that. And he stopped. It's like, thank you for listening to me say that. Oh, my God.
That's wonderful. I mean,
he wasn't offended or slighted. He was like, I'm really glad you told me. I can only imagine how boring this must be. But, when you're the one showing the pictures, all your memories are coming up. And he was missing that, I was gracious for, probably 20 minutes. But beyond that, I was like, oh, please, no more pictures, And I think, years ago, I would have just kept nodding and smiling and fading and fading and fading. So, and if, we haven't had many, but the times things have come up. Because, again, my body is just like, ding, 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 something's going on, Jane, do something right away, and I address it because I can't not. And I've learned, there's a saying I like, it's say what you mean what you say, and don't say it mean. And so I don't make it an about you. It's like, I'm feeling such and such. He wanted to go outside at one point. Somebody was walking down the street in his neighborhood, and he wanted to go and see they were carrying a baby. And I was like, where'd you put my boots? Because he had carried them the night before. And he goes, I don't know. And I was like, whoa. Don't take that tone with me, young man, But when he came back in, I said, you yelled at me. There was just this little girl voice inside of me, and it's like, I'm not going to be yelled at. And he was really apologetic. He said, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was excited to see this child, and I'm really sorry, and it won't happen again, and it hasn't. But again, in the past, I would have thought, oh, no, here it comes. This is it. This is it. I have to swallow it. And I didn't, and it just made it better. So, I've been attuned to those things. And taking full responsibility for my part, because, I can be hostile, too. And, when he calls me on it, it's like, oh, that never happened in my marriage. My ex never said, I'm mad at you, ever. But he just left.
It's so refreshing, because it's an honest relationship. It's where you feel safe enough to tell him how you feel, and he feels the same. And, there's no defensiveness, which is such a healthy thing. And, that's one of those Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse that John Gottman talks about in his relationship books. It's when you can talk things out and not have them fester and you nip them in the bud, you don't build all that crap.
No, the cancer doesn't grow.
It's true. It's true. That it's so healthy. It's so wonderful to hear. And, it's a lot of, your work that you've done on yourself is reflected in this relationship, which is so wonderful.
Yes, and his too. He can handle that. And he doesn't have to be right.
Yeah. Irma, do you have any more questions?
I did. That's just, first of all, just a comment. That's so wonderful to hear. The nuances of the personal experience land so much with me. So thank you, Jane, for that. The question that I have is when you're, again, going back to Ken's conversation that Sandy and Ken have, has he ever, Dave, or anybody that you've been with, presented that, mommy, I need mommy, and if so, how did you work your way around that one?
That's a great question, and the answer is I have not experienced that because I would run the other way. This is one of the most capable people I've ever met in my life. I mean, he hangs his laundry out on the line to dry. He does his own ironing. He feeds himself. I have to say that in my marriage, I was, this sounds terrible, but my ex-husband told me when he was like 6 years old and his mother's bridge group was there, he stood at the top of the stairs and said, "Mommy, wipe me." And, I use that as a metaphor, and I just, and through, obviously it wasn't that bad, but, I felt like many times I was just mothering him. And with Dave, I have never felt that way. I have never felt that he was not an equal adult ever, which is really a godsend. But that's that would be a real relationship killer for me, because God knows I raised 3 children and I'm done. That is, that's over.
But according to Ken, some men do have that. It's not a mommy like this is my whole side, but I have a moment of insecurity or self-doubt or something along the lines of that.
That I have been witness to, and he framed it. I'm ashamed of this. I feel bad. I feel like a loser. Took full responsibility for his feelings around what he was going to tell me, and it just made me love him so much more deeply that he could, take full responsibility for what was happening and his feelings around it, and it wasn't something I had to fix. And what I just listened, and I think one of the best conversation keeping goers is I didn't have to say anything. I just needed to listen to him, and I didn't have to judge it. I didn't have to fix it. He just needed to get it all out, and I was very happy to be a party to that.
And I love that he's so vulnerable with you.
Vulnerable in such a sweet way.
And that's how you really connect deeply. I mean, when somebody's willing to show, because I've dated men who were so tough and so macho and so shielded that I could never develop intimacy with them because they just were too afraid to be real, to show weakness, supposed weakness, and it's not. It's part of life. If you can't show up as your all the colors that are in your, crayon box, then you're only showing part of who you are, and that doesn't allow people to get closer. And so I love that he is that with you.
Very much.
And Irma,
so.
You and I have had discussions. Irma and I know each other through a webinar program that we both were subscribed to, and I heard, and we also were part of a man whispering program to learn how to talk to men without nagging, which the woman who ran that was part of one of my guests, Liana Silver. And I remember you asking about the mommy energy because I totally resonated with it. I also get a lot of men who it feels like that because we're both strong women, and I think that for me one of the secrets was learning vulnerability, to stop trying to be so damn tough, and capable, and to be able to show that I actually need people to be in my life, to contribute to my life. So I don't know if that's something that you're still experiencing, Irma.
I haven't been in the dating scene for a bit. As I've been listening to more and more your blogs, and I'm sitting there saying, okay, what's next? And just working my way through them, which is incredible. I'm thinking, oh dear, look what I'm doing. Growing my business, and here's spring, and I'm always ready at spring, as everyone is, as every living object is, to connect in a different way. So connecting with that, or thinking about that mommy energy, because I am, like you both, rather dynamic women, I just want to make sure I could see it, that it's the vulnerability versus, oh, here's that strong woman that I've been hoping to find, that I can then completely sort of undress myself and not having to do my own personal work. So just being in that space. I think I've held too many men's hearts up in the air, and minds and bodies, and don't want to do that anymore.
Nip it, Irma. Nip it.
Right. Yeah, nip it in the bud, and recognize the difference between a strong man who's just showing his vulnerability and a man who's just weak and wants to glob off of your energy. Because I think that's pretty easily identifiable.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, thank you, Irma.
Great to hear your voice, Irma.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Sandy.
I'm going to mute you again. Thank you. Okay. So, Jane, let's talk about the similarities between dating and running a business, because you and I have talked about that a lot. And so what has dating taught you about your business, or business taught you about dating? And if you can speak to that a little.
Well, I think, what strikes me even more than my own experiences of dating is, whenever you and I have a conversation and I'll say something about business and you'll say, yeah, it's the same in dating, and I'm always struck by how exactly true that is. And, I mentioned the thing with Brad, and, knowing when an opportunity is the right opportunity, and it's not a rejection of him, it's really the idea or the timing. You have a saying that the most important four-letter word in dating is next, and I would say that's the same in business as well. That if this didn't work out, it's like you only want to try so much. If your heart is in it, the same thing. Is there a gut feeling about it? And there are so many opportunities, so just move on to the next one. One of the things I wanted to say was that personally, my life is so satisfying. And yet, when I was, when I didn't have somebody in my life and I was focusing on my business, it was like, oh, if only I had this part of it. What's happening now is that my business life is actually very quiet. And what I realize is that, I'm trusting that the next opportunity is going to come along and reveal itself at the right time, as with Dave. When I was, and my marriage had ended and I grieved for a full year without going out with anybody. And then it was like, I want a partner. All I want is, somebody in my life. And so my focus went to that. And, now that that's really a very satisfying part of my life, I need to feel that around my business again. But I also trust that, as with a relationship, when it's right, and that it will be there. And not in any way that there isn't business or a man for me, that I have always been confident that I will be successful. It's just, I feel like the universe gave me lots of time to develop this wonderful relationship, to work on family issues, which I've been doing, and now it's time for the business to really take off again, because I can give more time to it. So there's, to me, they're constantly mirroring each other. How it's the Zen thing. How you do anything is how you do everything. And so, how I approached the relationship was that I was sure I would have one. I did whatever it took to get one. I'm thriving in it, and I will do the same thing with business. I'm waiting for a little more motivation, but that's okay too.
Well, those are all really good points. I think that trust piece, it just speaks to trusting that there's abundance. And I made my decision to marry my husband based on scarcity. I really thought I was running out of chances, or running out of, ovaries, running out of time. And it's terrible to make decisions based on fear and lack. And so, just sitting with it, I mean, you just sound so at peace, even though, the business isn't where you would maybe want it to be at this point. It's shifting. And I've seen your business really shift. You're really getting clear about what your next steps are, and having downtime also presents other opportunities. There's a real sense of peace that I get when I talk to you about your business now.
Mhm. And also about my relationship. I'm not anxious.
Right.
It's just and there's that equanimity in all things in my life. And that doesn't mean that I don't have scary days or upsets and all that, but I really face them square on and deal with them immediately. I don't let things... Remember, I was up at Kripalu, which is a yoga center in Lenox, Mass. that I have gone to for over 20 years now, and there was somebody speaking there, and he demonstrated, he's like, as though he were lifting up the corner of a rug, and he goes, "Hello, little rug, sweep, sweep," and he kind of pushed things under. I don't do that at all. I never put things away because they fester, and, like we talked about the cancer symbol or analogy, I want everything to see the light of day, and then it's, over and out, done. And, that's the whole nipping it in the bud. It's much easier than when it's the flowers have already been arranged into a beautiful bouquet. It's a little late to say, sorry, this isn't working. It's like, but we have the bouquet. It's like, you know what? Should have nipped it. It gets harder and harder to say it.
It does, and because you built layers and history, and there's lots of arms to it, and that's what happens in families. It's like, the relationship hasn't worked for 20 years, and then how do you extricate yourself from something that's so stale and hasn't been working because you were too afraid to take the move to end things.
Exactly.
And I would say that I pretty much know about relationships right away, and in the past, when I first started dating, I would stay a couple months. And I knew. I remember being on a plane when I had my first boyfriend after a divorce, and I was talking to a total stranger, and I was telling her about a guy I was interested online versus the one I was currently dating. And she's going, "Boy, you sound a lot more interested in the guy that you haven't started dating." And I was like, okay, I can hear the passion in my own voice. A total stranger can hear it. That's a really good sign that I have to break up, and I did almost immediately after I got back.
Well, I think what you're saying is we can't, I can't lie to myself anymore, and I think there was a time where I was lying constantly to, try to convince myself. I had a breakthrough experience 3 years ago. I went to it was a retreat, and there was an element of it where you really identified your inner child, and somebody was play acting all these. It's called a psychodrama, and I saw her, my little child, on the other side of the room, and I said, I'm going to take care of you. And intuitively, the woman who was playing me said, "Yeah, right," because I had always neglected that part of me. And I'll tell you that since that day, I have not neglected that part of me once. Because I will, it was so vivid to me that is what I had done. I had betrayed myself for years and my entire life, and I cannot do that anymore. I am no longer wired in that way, and I won't. So
I hear you, sister.
Yeah,
I am. So with
exactly,
you on that.
And it's a good place to be. It's actually more humane.
It's totally more humane, and it's like clean. You're living in alignment with your values and with who you are. You're not giving up stuff for other people. That is probably one of the biggest things I stand for in my coaching. It's so important to honor yourself, honor your process, honor your character. Don't give up pieces. And I just couldn't see it for a long time. I just felt like, if you just morph a little more into something that somebody else wants, but just to keep the peace and the status quo. Life is so much more than the status quo, man. My
really, life is very rich, very rich.
Yeah, totally.
Very dimensional, and I'm thriving. I love my life. I wouldn't trade with anybody.
That's such a wonderful thing to say. And you do have a great life. I'm lucky enough to be part of it, and you've been
and
very
it's
pivotal
way
in my
different than
life.
it was, a few years ago. Very pared down. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment, and I'm living in 575 square feet, and I've never felt more abundant.
Well, that's an important piece, that people think you have to have certain things to feel certain things. And like you talk about Dave, it's very similar. That, stop looking at the outer stuff. Look at the inner stuff. That's what's really important.
Exactly,
So we have just a few more minutes till we end, unfortunately. This has just been fabulous. And I thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing a piece of yourself that not everybody gets to hear.
And I also feel like I'm the poster child for hope. I mean, I'm going to be 65 in July, and it's like I am in the best relationship I've ever been in. It's really, I feel like there is hope for you out there, and I'm, I won't say I'm not special. We're all special, but it wasn't. I worked it. I made the decision I wanted to do it. I hired you. You helped me, and it came to fruition. And I would have kept going if I hadn't met Dave. I would have kept going because it's a very important piece to me, and I could not be happier personally than I am right now in terms of my relationship. It's so fulfilling to me.
That's really wonderful. And I think that piece about how you're not passive, you are a person who goes after what you want. And I think that's what separates people who are successful in business, entrepreneurs. You talk about that, I'm sure, a lot in your work. The difference between somebody who succeeds and someone who doesn't is the person who really is persevering.
There's always the person in the audience who said, well, I sent out a postcard mailing.
Yeah.
I posted on Twitter. It's like, and it's like it's all of these things. It's not one thing. It's I went on the dates, I did the profile, I went online, I sent the emails, I followed up, I got rejected. It's all of that. It's all. It's not one thing. It's not. There's no silver bullet in anything. None. No, that's a good point. And here you are with success to show and fulfillment. And I love bringing stories of hope to my audience because people need to see these are real people who actually worked and found love, and you can have it too. We're all human. We're kind of pretty much all made of similar stuff. It's about really doing the work. Don't be a victim of your past. Don't be a victim of your age. If you're doing something and it's not working, figure out what it is on your own or get help to figure it out and change it because you think you have the same philosophy. It's I believe in the Jim Rohn, work harder on yourself than you do on your career, relationship, or whatever. And I did that, and I created a vision for who I was looking for. I thought about all of my friends who were in successful relationships and what all the characteristics were, and I had 38 or 39 different things that Dave fulfills every single one of them. But I also realized that so do I. I have every one of the things I was looking for and somebody else to mirror back to me. So I think it's really getting clear again on what you want and then believing that you can have it. That's a big piece of it.
I love that. Well, thank you, Jane. Tell people how they can find you, please.
My website is janepollak.com, and it's Pollak, janepollak.com. And I'm on Twitter and Facebook, and it's all Jane Pollak. Jane Pollak.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And
it was great, Sandy. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to let you guys know I'm going to be taking off for a few weeks vacation, and I'll be back on the air on Monday, April 8th at 7 p.m. It's a Monday night show, which is different than my usual Tuesday afternoon show. So it's 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. I'll be interviewing the matchmaker and dating coach Jasbina Alawalia of Intersections Match. She works mainly with Asian people, and she's going to be speaking about dating as an empowered woman. I hope you'll tune into that show. And I love when people visit my website, lastfirstdate.com. Let's stay connected on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thank you for listening in, and remember to have courageous, bold, and meaningful conversations throughout your day. Bye-bye.